Hello ladies and gentlemen, and in today's video we are going to be doing something that actually I wasn't expecting to do, but it's a rather grey day and we've had several rather grey, uninteresting sorts of days where going out with a camera actually isn't necessarily the best thing to do, and for some of us we might be in lockdown, we might not be allowed to go outside, and of course last time we had lockdown people turned to doing macro photography, and that's what I wanted to do as well. Now what I did was rather cleverly set myself up against a glass window which is going to sound absolutely awful through this microphone. But I did it for a reason, and then the day was so dark that actually it's not helped at all. You see, when you do macro photography, you need an awful lot of light, and one of the best light sources that you've got in your house is the outside. And usually we get a really great lump of light coming in through. Lump is not the right word, but usually we get an awful lot of great light coming in through here. Today, unfortunately, we don't. So I've had to set this thing up. This is the Neewer light. This is one of the lights that I actually use to do my video recording usually. It's a continuous light, it's an LED. I also have an LED light, and I borrowed this from my mum, who bought this thing from a place called 7 Day Shop. If you're in the UK, they're a great photographic company. They do their own stuff, obviously. That's where that's from, and that's going to be helping with just a little bit of lighting. I'll show you the lighting setup in a minute, but I just want to show you the camera for now, because right now I've put the camera, that's the XT3, look, on this gimbal. Now we've used this before when I did the macro shots with Dr. Strange earlier in the year during the first lockdown. This thing is a rail system for macro, so I can move this and it will move the camera forward and backwards, and I can move this and it'll move it from side to side. And of course the benefit of having that is that you don't have to keep trying to move the thing or move the camera and then lose your shot altogether. So macro photography, when you're doing really close-up macro, there's only going to be a sliver of it, even if you're at higher F numbers, that is in focus. So you always need to focus stack, and that bracket lets you focus stack a lot quicker. Now let's talk very briefly about the lenses that we're going to try today, because there are three different options if you want to do macro on the Fuji system. The first one is this. This is the beast, the 80mm F2.8, and this thing is, I've taken a couple of pictures with it so far and it's absolutely stunning, really, really good. Now it comes with a hood. I don't tend to use hoods because we're not really in a position where we should have a lot of flare on the things at all, so I'm going to take that off. We also have, now, oh, right, the 80mm. Great lens, it's a 1:1 lens, and for macro that's really important. I also have, I think this is the one, no, okay, that's not the one. I also have this. It's the smallest of all of the lenses. This is the 60mm, and this isn't 1:1. It's an aspherical lens, but it's an f2.4 at 1:2, I think. Okay, so what's the difference between a 1:1 lens and a 1:2 lens? And this is very important. That the 1:1 and 1:2 is the ratio of the lens, the ratio of the macroness of the lens. That's not a proper word. But the idea is with a 1:1 lens, you will replicate something at life size. So if you have something like this lens, for example, and you focused on it with a macro lens, then you would get a 1:1 representation of it, its full size. If you've got a 1:2 lens, like, well, this lens is, then when you focus on something, you get a half size representation of it. So obviously, when you're doing macro, and you want to get really, really close into things, having that 1:1 ratio is really important. But for everyday use, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't use the 1:2 lens. And actually, the 1:2 lens is very good. I've seen my mum doing some things with this before, but it doesn't necessarily give you everything that you need if you want to do macros. Now, there is a third option if you are on the Fuji system, and that third option is the 18 to 55mm lens. Yes, the kit lens. So we're going to try and do macro photography with the kit lens, but we're not going to use the kit lens alone because I have two of these. These are extension tubes, and they do mean that you lose a little bit of light, but I've got two here. I've got a 10mm and a 16mm, and they're not the original Fuji ones. They are Makey, I think, Meke, if you want to look them up, for X-mount lenses. And for the price of, I think these are about half the price of one of the Fuji ones, you've got both of these. And because there's no internal components to them, because there's no optics that you have to worry about, the image quality that you get with these is every bit as good as the image quality that you would get with the Fuji original ones. So that potentially, if you're on a budget, this, because you might already have this lens, and getting a set of these might be your best option. Now, I don't know, because I don't think there's anything published about putting all of these together and where you would be, what the ratio of that would be. But that's one of the things that we're going to have a look at today. How does it perform in the real world? So what are we going to be taking a picture of? Well, all year I've wanted to take a picture of a robin, and I've been looking out that window into our back garden because we do have a visiting robin, but I've not been able to manage to get him. I saw him the other day, so I know he's back in the garden, but actually getting here and having the camera set up and ready to go, I've not been there yet. I need to finish making these videos first, so I can go until Christmas. So what I've got is a robin, a little model robin, which we have in the living room, which is a lovely little thing. It's from Stratford-on-Avon, believe it or not. Robin with Blackberries, it's called. And we're going to be focusing on the face. Now, if I put this roughly here, let's have a quick look at the lighting setup that we've got. Okay, so here we can see the setup that we've got. And the one light is off to one side. Now that's on full at the moment, and it's shining its light. It's a little bit of a distance away onto the model here, and that means that we have this part of the model is going to be completely dark. But that's one of the reasons why we have this light up here. Now if I put that on, there's two settings. You can see what's happened here is that actually the wings and the back of the head, they actually start to get lit up at this point. And that's what I wanted from this, to give it that kind of studio look, so that we've got a bit of depth with all the shadows and things that we've got in here. Now here's something else that you can do when you've got model shots like this. You see what my hand's doing right now? So if you put something light round underneath that, you could actually light up this side of the model. Not something that I want to do on this particular shot, but it's something that you could do in the future. So my next step is actually to set all of this up, to get the camera, get the first lens on, and to make sure that we've got a shot that I actually want to take. So I will see you in just a moment when we've got all of that set up, and I'll go through the actual framing of the shot and how we're going to put it all together. Okay, we've just lost all of the light that we've had outside. I started filming about 3 o'clock and have got various things that you set up when you do stuff like that. And we've just all of that light that we had once there is just gone completely. Now I've set the shot up the way that I wanted it, and we're really focusing in on the bird's face, and you should be able to see that on screen right now. Now, one of the things that you need to know about this, if I touch this slightly, you get all this movement in here. So it's really important that we put on our Q menu on this, and we make sure that we have a 10-second timer on this. You don't want to use 2 seconds, because look, if I touch this, it takes longer than 2 seconds for it to actually calm down. So 10 seconds should be it. The other thing that you're noticing right now is that the picture at the moment is very blurred. The eye is nice and sharply in focus, but the rest of the picture's blurred. And this is what this rail is for, because if we take this rail, we can move it back until you see the beak itself, or the very point of the beak, is in focus. And what we're going to need to do is take that and go to the next bit, to the next bit, and the next bit, and the next bit, and so on and so forth, until we've gone right the way through the image and the back of that bird's head is completely sharp. And we actually might want to take it a little bit further than that, because there's some other parts of the image that are a little bit lost in focus there as well. So we'll take this back to where the eye was. And every time, of course, we're going to want to have a shot, the 10-second timer and everything like that. Now, The other thing that you have to remember about this lens, it's an 80mm lens, so you need to be quite a way away. I'm not quite a foot away from the actual model. And you saw how big the head of the model was on screen. So it's quite a big zoom. The 60mm is going to be similar, but that's not going to be quite as big in the frame, and you'll see that a little bit later on. Okay, so let's start doing these shots. First of all, we're going to put this... Oh, I've got it on the wrong mode. Okay, so first of all, we're going to put this onto 10 seconds. And we're... Now, because of the light in here, because there's not actually a lot of light in here, this thing, which is on 100, is very good, but it doesn't give you all of the light that you want. So what we're going to have to do here is take our ISO down. Now I'm going to do it... Gosh, that's a lot. Let's see. 125, I think. And we'll do it an ISO of 500. Now that's one stop underexposed, but actually one of the things I found about the Fuji RAW files is that 1 or 2 stops you can kind of recover from. 1 stop is pretty much okay when you're recovering from that. So that's what we're going to do. We're ready to go. I'm just going to press that shutter button, that release button. Now the other thing that you can do if you haven't got, or if you're not comfortable about touching the camera. Okay, so that's got that one shot of just the eye being in focus, and we'll do the rail system in just a sec. If you're not comfortable about touching the camera and you want to be further away from it, you can use the Fuji app on your phone to set off a remote trigger. That does a very similar thing, and with that means that you don't always have the same problems. But of course, that does have other issues. Now my battery is starting to die in this camera, and I really should have changed it before it started. So let's do this rails system thing so that you can see. Okay, we're going to go to the tip of the beak and take an image. And of course we've got that 10-second wait. And I'll go through all of this, and then you'll be able to see the final image when we get into the voiceover. Now, the plan had been to focus stack the images that I had from each lens. Unfortunately, I ran out of time. I do apologise for that. Sometimes focus stacking can take a long time, especially if Photoshop doesn't quite get things right and you have to alter things manually yourself. Nevertheless, this is the image from the 80mm 2.8 lens, and I was really pleased with the sharpness here and the performance of the lens overall. It behaves exactly like you would expect. It's lovely, it's quiet, it's fast focusing, and you don't have to be too close to the subject in order to get it all in. If you're really serious about macro on the Fuji system, this really is the lens for you, and incidentally, it's also good for portraits as well. But even used, you're going to have to pay around £900 for this lens, which is a saving of £200 off the retail price. Nevertheless, the 1:1 ratio means that you are not going to miss those little details at all, and it also pairs with the 1.4 teleconverter if you need to take shots of objects that are further away. But whilst this lens is phenomenal, what can be achieved with the cheaper alternatives? Well, that was still to be seen. Okay, here we are with the F2.4 60mm, and you can see already that actually the bird is a little bit further back in the frame. Everything else is pretty much where we've left it. But we're going to do a very similar thing here. We're going to take an image right from the back, right the way to the front. So we're going to get a stacked image and see which one's better. And you know what? I have to admit, I do like the look of this 60mm lens, but I think actually it might be better for portraiture. It's no good for video because it's ever so noisy when it focuses, but actually for portraiture it might be very good. The quality of it, I think, is there. So anyway, that's it. We're going to have a look at this now. I know when we come to the final lens, the 18-55, we are going to have a little bit of a problem because both of the lenses that we've used before have been 2-point-something, 2.8 and 2.4 in this case. Well, the 18-55 starts at 2.8, and I know for a fact to do macro on it, 35mm is the best setting that you can get. So I am wondering whether or not that alone is going to mean that you have to boost your ISO up so much that actually it would discount it from being a great macro lens, especially if you're in darker conditions. And not that we're in darker conditions now, but we're not in the lightest of conditions. We're not in studio conditions, let's face it. Anyway, okay, here we go. We've got our bird. I'm going to do what I did before and roll this back to sort of there, which is where our first thing is. We'll put it back into photo mode. And we're just going to take all the pictures from there and we'll see what that looks like just now. I was actually very impressed with the 60mm, especially because it goes to 2.4 instead of 2.8, but I don't think the intention with this lens was really for true macro photography. Whilst it holds up well, and you can see the image is nice and sharp where I'm focused, it's a very loud lens and it's much slower to focus. You do get to be far enough away from the subject and still get a good shot, but they do appear smaller in your frame. And if you want those crisp macro images, especially of insects, well, there's no getting around that. What I think this lens is actually better for is portraiture, especially the sort of portraits that need you to be close in on the face. At that point, the macro abilities of the lens come into play, and the fact that it's a 1:2 ratio doesn't hold you back from the type of shots that you would want to do with it. Despite that, you can get some really good shots with this lens, as you would expect from a Fuji Prime, and it's much lighter than the 80mm as well. So it's good if you're in the market for a budget lens, but don't expect miracles from it. The best thing about it is how it performs on portraits. Second hand, this lens will be around about £400 and you can pick up a new one for just under £600. So I've changed to the very, very last option. This is the budget option. And you have to see how much closer I have to have the... Now, like I said, with the other two, I was just under a foot away. With this, I am that far away. So I'm having to get a lot closer to this image. Now, that's fine because it's a model. But if this were an insect or, or any other sort of animal or maybe a leaf, you're very, very close to kind of interfering with that insect if you're doing something like that. Now, I've had to change the whole position of the thing. I brought the bird forward a lot. I think I'm going to bring this light a little bit further around, and I've set the other light up so that it's behind it so that you get a bit of light on the back as well. And again, we're going to do exactly the same thing that we did before. So we'll pull this now. Let me just show you what we've actually got. This is the image that we're working with. I've tried as much as possible to match it up, but obviously things have to change a little bit. The other problem with doing macro is when your camera is on a rig like this and you have to change the battery, you have to de-rig it in order to change the battery. Not a problem all the time, but worth pointing out. Anyway, right, now we'll take the photo at this point so you can see what we're doing. We'll put it back on to S. And you can also see, because we're at f4 now instead of f2.8, you can also see that it's a much larger depth of field, which in some cases is a good thing, and in other cases it won't be. So for example, I am going to have to push this up to an ISO of 800 to get the same sort of lighting, and that was still a stop underexposed, but it's the same sort of lighting that we had in the previous two things. So the other two lenses, expensive that they might be, they both have the edge over this at the moment, partly because you don't need to be as close, and partly because this one goes to 2.4, the other to 2.8, so you can let a lot more light in straight away. Okay, let's pull that back so that we've got just the beak in focus. And when we have the beak in focus now, there's an awful lot more in focus. So the good thing about this is that it's not going to take as long to do. And the other good thing about this is that it doesn't take as long for the thing to settle down, so I can use a 2-second timer. Let's put that on. And so from there on, I can get the next bit in focus. And then the next bit in focus. And you're not moving this very far. I mean, the movements that I'm doing on the gimbal itself, on the rail system itself, isn't very much. But still, more of the bird is in focus all the time now. So I'll take this back a little bit more. I think now the solution that I have at the moment, because I haven't been able to afford to get a macro lens, is this setup that we've got right now, is the 18 to 55. And actually, to be fair, it's not bad. It can do flowers and plants and things. If I'm out and about and I see something, I go, oh, I wouldn't mind that as a macro shot. It works in 35mm and 50mm. It seems to be best. If I put it onto 35mm now, though, and try to focus from where I am, it wouldn't work. So the focus, you'd have to be much closer. 35mm is really, really close to the lens before you can actually get a focus of it. If I try and show you this now, you can see the bird is virtually inside the lens, so getting light in at that area can be very difficult too. 55 seems to be where this setup works the best, and there is a use there for it. But honestly, if I was going out specifically to do macro, I think one of these two lenses would actually be a much better bet for you. But we did say that this was a lens shootout, so we need to see all of the pictures together, and this final picture we haven't seen yet. So I'll see you in the voiceover to see what it actually looks like. And here's that shot. Now, like I said, this is my current setup, and it works for me because I don't take many bugs and things, which would get scared away by using this. It's not as easy to use as the other lenses, and because you have to be closer, it can be very difficult to get light onto your subject, even if you're using a flash. Now, you do have the ability to use either of the converters on their own, and what I was doing today was really is for very close-up photography. For long-distance shots, you may be better using the 11mm tube on its own. Honestly, that's probably the only one you would need. And for people on a tight budget, or if you're just dipping your toe into macro photography, it does do a really good job. What I was surprised about was how good the image quality is from it. Although at a lower aperture, you do have to boost your ISO, letting more grain into the image. Like I said in the video, as an addition to the 18 to 55 kit lens, well, this set me back just £30. So it's great to have a play with whilst you're deciding if you want to do more. All in all, it's difficult to choose between the three images I got. Certainly there is a little extra sharpness in the 18mm, but it's not really enough to worry about. But Fuji tends to release lenses with specific utility in mind, and I think that that's what we're seeing here. So what should you buy? As with most options from Fuji, go with the most expensive one that you can afford, unless you're just trying things out and then get the cheapest. Certainly you're not going to be disappointed with the image quality whichever way you go, but you will quickly run into the limitations of the cheaper alternatives. Nevertheless, that's no reason not to try the cheaper ones and see if they're for you. That's it for this particular video. Hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, give it a thumbs up, and I'd love to hear what you think about macro on the Fuji system in the comments below. If you're new here, of course, please do hit the subscribe button, click the little bell icon at the end, and choose the all notifications tab that pops up, and you'll get to see all of the new videos that I put out every time they're launched. For now though, thanks very much for coming along, and I will see you next time, and until then, like I say at the end of all of these videos, keep taking those pictures.